You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, this is Richard Estep, ghostwriter, and from TV's Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Investigators, Haunted Case Files, and Paranormal 911, and you are listening to PSH Radio on Parasearch Radio.
Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back this week. I am joined by a co-host this week who I shall make known in a moment. We are doing a very different show this evening. We don't have a guest on. You know, seems it's Valentine's Day. So we are doing a topic show, and it is a very not weird topic show, but maybe interesting topic show. And we are going to be discussing some different haunted theatres, not the Operation Hospital type theatres. Theatres which people go and watch plays and things like that. So this evening I am joined by Penny. Good evening, Penny.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. Feels like only yesterday that I was on air.
That's because it wasn't on it.
That's the joke, love. That's the joke, yeah.
See, people obviously listening will know that anyway, but so...
Oh dear. Yes, obviously Penny Haunted Histories, and yesterday I was on air, so it feels like I've never been away.
Yeah. But it's always the case, isn't it? You know, we love what we do, so...
Yes, and when, you reached out and you said, could you give me a hand? And yeah, sure. Not a problem. Although I will admit I am sitting here in my pyjamas. I'm not suited and booted to do this. I hope that's okay, Sam.
Yeah, that's fine. I mostly do it in my pyjamas anyway, half the time, so...
No standing to attention on these shows, I tell you what, we're all nice and comfortable. So you say we're going to be talking about theatres, and as you say, dramatic theatres. What made you choose theatres for a subject tonight, Sam?
Well, I think it was because obviously, like, everybody hears of the typical haunted locations like asylums, hospitals, castles, and obviously people probably don't know that there's actual haunted theatres. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I've actually investigated a local theatre before called Crew Lyceum Theatre.
Right.
So obviously I know some can be haunted, but it's the same obviously because it's like if you think people do plays, so there's probably so much emotion in these type of buildings from plays and things like that, because they do plays with excitement, plays with sadness.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But do you think, I'm kind of taking over here, I'm interviewing you, it's supposed to be the other way around, but do you think that some of it could be linked to how superstitious the acting profession is?
Possibly.
Do you know about any of the superstitions that actors are meant to sort of hold dear to them when they're on stage?
Nope.
No? Would you like to know about some?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, see, I think this is what, theatres are. Yes, they are. I think a lot of them are incredibly active. I've not read a story about a theatre that isn't. In fact, and we're not going to be mentioning this one, and this is going to be a bit of a curveball to you, but even the one where I live in Chelmsford, which is quite a modern, I think it's like 1950s, 1960s, even that has a resident ghost, or it's meant to. and I think it's meant to be one of the I can't remember if it's the lighting technician but he used to double up then as a ticket collector or something as well, and he loved his job so much after he died he's been haunting the place. So I've never read of a theatre that doesn't have some kind of, and I just wonder if it is down to how superstitious the drama profession actually is. I mean, you know the term break a leg. Have you heard that term? You know, they say they don't say good luck before you go on stage. They say break a leg. Well, I always thought that's a bit harsh. You know, tell someone to break a leg before they're about to go on stage. That's a bit mean. But it's actually to do with the fact that the curtains that mask backstage are known as the legs in a theatre. And to break a leg means to come through those curtains, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, that is.
Yeah.
Because, like, any of your person who doesn't know this would be like, okay, so you mean to, like, actually break your own leg?
Yeah, exactly. And I only found that out today when I was looking it up, that I suddenly thought, I wonder where that term comes from. And I found the other one, the big one. We're not going to say the name of this play. It will be known as the Scottish play. But you're not allowed to say the name of this play on stage. By Shakespeare, the Scottish play. Rhymes with Hackreth, I suppose.
Yeah, I know which one you're on about.
Just in case anyone didn't. You're not supposed to say the name of the actual play in a theatre or on stage, otherwise there's going to be loads and loads of bad luck. I mean, that's one of the well-known ones. So I just wonder if it's this level of superstition and it's this level of sort of, as you say, energy and passion that goes into that job that causes theatres to be active.
Now you've got me like down the rabbit hole.
I've got down another rabbit hole, have I? Okay.
Again.
Okay. It was just one of the things I was thinking, because we were talking when we were preparing for this, and we were saying like what how were we? I can't quite remember. You were going to be looking at why these things would be haunted and what could be causing them and why they would be active and all that kind of thing. And I was thinking of those sort of things too. And one of them I was thinking is maybe it is because, let's be honest, the lovies of the theatre world do tend to be they are dramatic. That's their job. And maybe that's some kind of special energy that they create that encourages things to hang around.
And obviously with the superstition and that, it kind of goes back to like obviously like where some say that all like some paranormal activities in your head.
Yeah, could be. So which theatres do you want to talk about? So
we have Dock Street Theatre in Charlestown, which is in the US, obviously. Then the Palace Theatre in New York. And then we have two theatres we are going to be talking about in Liverpool, which is the Liverpool Empire Theatre and the Epstein Theatre.
Okay.
I said that last one right.
I think it depends on your accent, how you pronounce Epstein, however you pronounce it. I think I'm sure that Brian Epstein would have answered to most of them in his day.
But like what I found going to the Palace Theatre in New York one, first of all, what I found really interesting is it's the actual main theatre in New York, you know. Is it Times Square or somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was looking into the sort of the background of it, and it's not. I mean, obviously things in America don't tend to be as old as we have here, but it opened in March of 1913. Yes, you're right. It's Broadway, so it is in the sort of central part. But in I think it was 1932, it became what's known as an RKO palace, and what that meant was. Have you seen the original version of Annie, the first version of Annie, the one that had Albert Finney, the late, recently demised Albert Finney, playing Daddy Warbucks? Have you seen it? No?
Probably. I don't know.
You wouldn't forget Annie. Tomorrow.
Yeah, I know what Annie is, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, there's a scene in that because that's set during the Great Depression, and there is a scene in that where he takes her to the theatre, but it's actually the cinema. And back in those days, back in the 1930s, you used to have in these big sort of palace theatres, like, well, actually, if the Palace Theatre would have had them, but these kind of palatial theatres that were also movie theatres as well as being stage theatres. You would have like loads of dancers doing a massive display live before the film showed. And what I was going to say is, if you think of that scene in Annie where that's actually happening, you're not too far from what the RKO Palace would have been like. So you would have had this amazing grandeur, these beautiful women in all these beautiful costumes dancing and, you know, getting the audience really hyped up, if you like, for the black and white film that was going to follow them. So, and looking at pictures of it back in the day, incredibly grand, this kind of really palatial type setting. Is that what is that the sort of thing you found from it when you were looking up your research?
I don't even know what the palatial means.
Palatial.
Palatial means.
Palatial. How would I describe palatial? Well, think of it's a variation of the word palace. So it means
like regal.
Yeah, very sort of grand and stunning. And I mean, you know, you look at somewhere like Buckingham Palace, and you can imagine all the gold leaf everywhere, and everything's. I was going to say opulent, but you may not. Everything's very grand, very, very sort of not run of the mill. And it was kind of all this, you know, bright and shiny and jewels. And does that make sense? That kind of, you know, you're not your backstreet sort of seedy type cinema type thing. And those were the pictures I saw of it. But all I would say to anyone, if they wanted to imagine what it would have been like, go and, you know, have a look at the original version of Annie, the original version with Aileen Quinn, I think, played Annie in it, and say the late Albert Finney played Daddy Warbucks. And there's a scene in that where he takes her to a show. And it was, you know, whereas the poor people, they would just go and see a film. If you went to a movie theatre, there was a theatrical production on as well as the film. And I would have thought that for a lot of people going there, it would have been this magical experience to see not only a moving picture as in the film, but also seeing these beautiful women doing these dance routines and, you know, chorus girls. You know what I mean by chorus girls, that kind of thing. And I just think of the sort of, you know, the joy that people would have felt going somewhere like that. That, I mean, that kind of energy alone must be quite an interesting one to latch onto.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like, obviously you're going back to obviously that one, and you've just been talking about. It's like in that era, it was kind of like people always get. I'm not saying in our era that people don't get dressed up now for the theatre, but like you say, they used to be in, like, you know, the best frocks, the best jewellery. You know, it was kind of like not flaunting your money, but, you know,
your Sunday best.
Yeah.
Your Sunday best, the sort of stuff you'd wear to go to church on a Sunday. It was seen as being your Sunday best. And you've also got, you know, you think about it, because it was a vaudeville theatre before it became a movie theatre in the 1930s when it was bought out by RKO. But as a vaudeville, you would have had the song and dance routines. You would have had the sort of the cheeky comedy. You would have had that whole sort of slapstick type thing. So there was going to have been a lot of laughter as well, and we all know how much energy laughter can create. So I suppose residual energy left there from all the laughter and the enjoyment. Yeah,
it could be. Could be. It's like, obviously, because obviously we've looked up some of the hauntings. That could be like that's what I got from the research I was doing, is most of these hauntings are probably residual. because obviously how they explain it and how these like to me and all the research I did on the hauntings, I didn't see like once of a certain spirit which they mentioned of going into a different area. They just stayed in one area, and it was like playing and playing and playing, and that's what they call residual haunting.
Yeah. So which ones did you find out about for the palace then?
I just found out about the tightrope walker acrobat, Luis Borsellino.
Louis Borsellino. That's all right, or Balls. Well, the reason I'm saying that is that I found out about him too, and I thought being a historian by trade, I'd dig a little bit and see if I could find out like life and death records for him, not just about the fact that, as you say, he's meant to haunt the palace, and that you tell me what you tell everyone what you found out, and then I'll add in what I found out.
Well, Louis. I say Louis, but basically what happened was, obviously everyone knows what a performing rope walking acrobat is, and obviously he was performing, i.e. swinging from the rafters, but back then they called it dress circle rim, and he basically fell to his death because there was no netting. And witnesses of, obviously, apparently when they see his apparition fall to his demise, they hear a scream.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting, Sam? Me being me, I thought I'd look into whether that actually happened. It didn't. Apparently, and I found the newspaper article talking about it, he did fall. He fell 18 foot and caused, I think he broke an arm or something like that, and it's something to do with internal hemorrhaging. But it didn't kill him. He actually didn't die for another 30 years. So, what my thinking is that it might have been that was he's gone it's definitely residual, because he didn't actually die there. But you and I both know that as a spirit, you don't, if it's a residual thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be what killed you. It doesn't necessarily have to be, it can just be an event that was impacted on you big time. And from, looking up his name and looking up the name of his acrobat troupe, which was the Forecasting Pearls, that's the most publicity they ever received that was to do with his fall. So I just wonder if that's why the fall keeps getting reenacted, because it was such a big thing for them, or for him, that it's on a loop and it keeps playing. But no, I found the newspaper article that described what had happened, and he didn't actually break his neck or anything in the fall, because one of the other rumours was he was a trapeze artist and he fell off the trapeze. He didn't catch the trapeze, and that was like, no, they didn't do trapeze work. It was acrobatic work, and like you say, tightrope type walking and actual pure acrobatics from in the rafters. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that one definitely is a residual kind of, it's a replay of an event that had a massive impact on him and on the theatre.
Yeah, so it's like Ashley Nib put in the chat room. So we could speculate that the events of energy remains at the place. The event crosses time to be seen again.
Yeah. Yeah,
because obviously it's like it would have been a traumatized event for him.
Oh, definitely traumatic. Yes, definitely.
Like anyone else, because you don't want to bear thinking about it, do you? Seeing someone, I know he didn't die, but still seeing someone.
They wouldn't have known that. Yeah, I mean, it was 1935. It happened. It was August 1935. So you think the medical stuff they would have had then wouldn't have been that good. Apparently, as soon as he fell, the curtain got dropped. So the audience wouldn't have seen what had happened to him. All they'd have seen is him falling. I should think he would have knocked himself out as well, so he would have looked dead to all intents and purposes. Apparently, like, it was a comedian or someone then came on to try and talk to everyone until they could shut the theatre down. So, yeah, it would have been well, it wouldn't have been a very nice thing to try and explain to people. And that's probably where the myth that he died came from, because nobody ever heard from him again. And, you know, that 18-foot fall possibly wouldn't have survived from. But no, he didn't actually die until 1963. That's when his death was recorded. So, yeah, it's that energy. It's that traumatic event. It's that recreation of it over and over and over again. But I'd rather it was residual than it was his poor spirit going through that over and over again, because you can imagine reliving something like that and knowingly going through that over and over, and it would be, well, it would be like being in hell on earth, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Did you find out anything else about the palace?
Not that I am aware of. Did you?
I did. I was leading you in for that. Back in 1995, a well-known psychic called Elizabeth Barron was asked to come in and do a reading, and she noted down details of 103 different souls that were trying to communicate with her, who had some kind of connection to the theatre. And two of the ones that she came up with were quite famous names, which I'm sure people will have heard of. One was Judy Garland. Now, Judy Garland was the original Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, she did a lot of work there. And she, apparently, she's picked up a lot hovering by one of the stage doors, the side doors to the stage, because it was built specifically for her. So she had easy access to the stage, so she didn't have to come down the same passageways as the rest of the cast. But the other person who's picked up on is the old crooner, Bing Crosby. As in, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, Bing Crosby. And the messages he apparently was giving Elizabeth was to say sorry to his children for being such an abusive dad. Which apparently he was. So, yeah, it sounds like there's still an awful lot going on at the palace for people who can pick up on it. I say, whether it's due to the superstition side that we were talking about, or whether it's just the fact that it you know, working somewhere like that, working on Broadway as an actor, it must be like the pinnacle of your career to be given a role on Broadway.
Yeah. My mind's just like blown.
I have that effect on people, Sam. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's blown in a good way, so you're okay.
Yeah, she's never going to ask me to co-host again. Yeah. Okay, what do you want to talk about next? Should we go to Charleston?
Yeah, let's go. It's called Charleston, isn't it? But I was calling it Charlestown.
Actually, you're historically correct, because originally it was known as Charlestown, and it was just as time went on, it became Charleston because it was easier to say. So there you go. You're ahead of the curve, Sam. Ahead of the curve. Tell us about the theatre in Charleston.
So, this is a strange thing to know, but basically, it wasn't always a theatre. It was originally known as the Planters Hotel, which was born in 1809 by Mr. and Mrs. Alexander Calder. And obviously they just wanted to do a renovation of a cluster of buildings, which was already located on site. And obviously the hotel was by 1930 needed desperate repairs, and an additional structure, like in construction started again. An additional structure was added, which was behind the hotel. Which then that's how the theatre come in, because they built both a stage and an auditorium. I nearly said something wrong there.
That's all right. I'm actually going to interject in a minute. Yeah. There was a theatre on the site before Planters Hotel was built.
See, this is why I probably missed that bit.
That's all right. It burnt down. The majority of it, but it was only there for 3.5 years in the 1700s. In 1740, there was a huge fire in the French Quarter, which is the part of Charleston it's in, that in the 18th of November in 1740, and it destroyed over 300 buildings. And the theatre, Dock Street Theatre, was one of them. It destroyed a lot of it. And it was only, you're totally right, it was only when they were renovating it in 1935 that they discovered that there had actually been a stage, and as you're saying, an auditorium, which you pronounce right, an auditorium there. So they redeveloped that and recreated the theatre. So it was a hotel for longer than it was a theatre, and it didn't do anything for sort of 60 odd years. But yeah, for 3.5, I think it was one of the first. Well,
it was one of the first original theatres in the city. Yeah.
So it's got, you know, that whole dramatic kind of being destroyed by fire. Now I couldn't find if anyone died in that fire. There was nothing about anyone having died, which would be amazing when you think about all the timber buildings and the close proximity of them. But that's the same with the Great Fire of London of 1666. Amazing that nobody really died when you think of the destruction. But it's quite a clearing thing, isn't it? Fire, like almost, you know, burn everything to the ground and start again. But no, you're right. It was a hotel for a good 130 years, 125 years. Yeah, it was an interesting change of use.
And I've seen a few photos online, like I think they're recent, and it's just like it looks like this open. Like the photos I saw, I don't know where they were from. I don't know if they were the original, but it just looked like a door, and then obviously the name of the theatre at the top of it.
It's small. It is very small. I think it's used a lot for amateur type productions. It's not compared to like the Palace in New York that we were just talking about. It's a very small theatre that's used for very small productions, but it's absolutely stunning. The architecture. But then again, the whole of the French Quarter in Charleston, I've never actually been, but I've seen a lot of the pictures in South Carolina, and it's architecturally beautiful. You know, the wrought iron and the design and the colours and all of that kind of thing. It would have been somewhere that you would have taken great pride to have been at. Well, I would have done. I would have done by how beautiful it is.
Yeah, I obviously remember looking at the photos when I was looking for it. It reminds me a bit of New Orleans.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, I see where you'd say. Yeah, definitely. But it's that whole Southern thing, isn't it? The Southern Belle, the antebellum movement, the whole sort of plantation, Southern Belle sort of... Yeah, it is very beautiful, though. It is definitely very beautiful. But what did you find out about the ghosts there?
So... there is apparently two. One's obviously a male and the other is a female. But firstly, what I found quite interesting was one was obviously part of the founding group of people, the owners, the Booth family, which obviously... I'm just trying to like think now.
Are you talking about Junius or Junius? I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I think it was Juliet. Was it Julius?
Junius or
it was weird, wasn't it? It was like a foreign name.
He's not foreign, but yeah, he was.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Junius or Junius Brutus Booth. Is that who you're thinking of?
Yeah. But
he was an actor, though. He was an actor.
Yeah, that's what I found interesting as well, because obviously it wasn't really like what I found out about him is it wasn't later on into my research that I found out he was an actual actor.
Yeah, but do you know who his son was?
No, you're putting me on the spot again.
No, this is one that I think will blow a lot of people away. This his son was he had two sons. One was called Edwin Booth, and the other one was a name of John Wilkes Booth. Now, I don't know if there's anyone in the chat room who is following this, but John Wilkes Booth was also an actor. But he's most famous for being the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln.
Oh yeah, I've got that bit. I've just seen it on my research.
but I find that quite, that link, you'd say, he was the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln in a theatre.
And it was would it have been after? Would it have been after the assassination? Well, it would have been obviously, or would it have been before the assassination?
What been before or after what?
When he was, his father was there.
His father would have been there before. But because Lincoln was, I can't get onto Google to have a look, but I'm sure Lincoln was 18. Perhaps Kerry could be looking it up for us and come in a second and tell us, but I'm sure Lincoln was mid-1800s, Abraham Lincoln. I'm sure he was mid-1800s because it was during the Civil War that he was one of the leaders. I'm waiting for Kerry. She said if we need her to look up anything, just shout her name and she will miraculously appear, like the evil queen that she is. But I'm pretty sure, and I can't see the chat room either. But
she's not putting nothing in the chat.
Hey, give me a chance, girls. I'm not a history queen, I would just like to say.
I can't even look it up on my phone because it's dying.
Carry on talking. I'll come back with a date.
Yes, okay. No, I'm pretty sure that John Wilkes Booth. I'm sure it was in the 1850s that he assassinated Lincoln, but that was in a theatre. So here's this whole sort of correlation of what we're talking about. That assassination was in a booth.
1865. From
1865, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, 1865.
I was a few years out, but late 1800s as opposed to the early 1800s. But so John Wilkes Booth, who was the son of Junius Brutus Booth.
Sorry, that was the first time they tried to assassinate him. Oh my God, see? This is why I don't do history. 2 weeks after that, Lincoln was to attend Laura Keene's acclaimed performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theatre in Washington.
Yeah.
He and his co-conspirators believed the simultaneous assassination of Lincoln and Andrew Johnson would throw the government into disarray. He arrived late, and then they did it with a .44 caliber single-shot Derringer pistol.
Now you're just showing off.
That's only because I've got the thing in front of me now. I can tell you a whole lot about it now.
The point was, can you not see my correlation? It was in a theatre. So John Wilkes, his whole life had been around the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
So Junius is meant Junius, whatever his name is. He's actually meant to haunt Dock Street, isn't he?
Yeah, and obviously, what's weird about this is he didn't really have. He had a connection with the theatre, but he also didn't have a connection with the theatre. But basically, what happened was he did not die in Charlestown. He actually died in and he just nearly says Louisiana then, but it's Louisville.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but he ask. I know I'm probably thinking of one of the other spirits, but I suppose that the thing is though, if that place was that important to him, he'd help build it up from nothing to become reasonably successful sort of local business. He's going to have an attachment to it, isn't he? He's going to want to come back and check his building because it's the other spirit that's meant to be there that I really feel sorry for.
Yeah, I did as well, which we shall obviously discuss here in a moment. But it's
definitely.
But it's obviously it goes back to the old residual again in a way with Junius, and the old can spirits actually travel from different locations.
What do you think?
I don't know.
I think they can be pulled to certain places that they want to be. I don't think. I know there's that joke that goes around on Facebook, isn't there? That think about what you're wearing because that's what you'll be wearing when you haunt people for the rest of your, for the rest of eternity. And I kind of see the joke, but I do also think that you can almost. I think you can kind of, within reason, almost choose what you're going to go back to, where you're going to sort of base yourself if you want to keep an eye on things. Because it's like when you hear of these, we'll talk about the two in the Liverpool two in a minute, but you hear about like a stage manager or the one I just mentioned, the Chelmsford one, where you've got, I'm sure he was a lighting engineer or something like that, but then they also doubled up as being ushers and ticket collectors as well. Why would he want to be there and not, say, keeping an eye on his family or whatever, or something like that? Well, he's obviously, he didn't die in the theatre. He's chosen to be back there. He has chosen that he spends his time there. There's stories of people digressing slightly, but there's stories of people who work in museums who say, oh yeah, I saw that really nice guide upstairs. They were telling me all about what the building was, and they're like, we haven't got a guide upstairs. And it transpires it's somebody who used to volunteer there who died and is still volunteering there after death. So there must be a certain amount of choice or pull. There must be some kind of magnetic pull that takes.
I think you're right, but I also think if you took each individual, if you could find exactly who it was that was haunting and look at the backstory of their life, if you've got, if that's all you've got, and that's what is your passion, like you said, like a tour guide or something like that, and that's where you felt the most alive and the most emotional connection to, then it stands to reason that that's where you'll be. Now, you're talking about theatres, and you mentioned previously in the show the emotional energy that's created, and it's created through several different forums within a theatre environment. It's created in the your portrayal of different characters and emotional responses. It's created by the audience and their emotional response to it. It's a definite different evocative feel within a theatre environment to any other environment in the world, and it's designed to create that emotional response, not just from the audience but from the people who are acting as well. You take on that different persona. We've heard many times about actors, film actors, taking on a role and actually becoming a different person whilst they're in that role. So it's about embracing all different types of your levels of subconscious to bring forth the emotions that are needed to embrace a role and translate that to create that evocative response from the audience back.
Yeah, it needs to be believable, doesn't it?
Exactly.
You need to believe you are that person.
And if you look at a backstory of a lot of actors, there's a lot of not great stuff that goes on behind the scenes. They live to be on the stage, the theatre. Yeah. And not just that, but you've got so many walks of life, so many different levels of theatre. You've got the grand theatres and the palatial ones, and then you've got like the Victorian, what's the word, Penny?
The vaudeville type.
The ones in Victorian Britain. Hall. Oh, God.
Music halls.
Music halls. Thank you, which is like a lower level. But they're all designed to
I was trying to tap into your psyche then to try and read what word you were trying to think of.
I was thinking Jack the Ripper, that kind of thing, like that kind of thing. So when you think about the emotional levels as well from different levels of society, if you could pin down which ghost it was or spirit it was, if you could literally do that and then look at the backstory, it could have been just where they felt most at home, where they felt most validated, where they felt most respected and all that sort of thing. You can understand why these places create that thing. And so much happens in theatres. You were just talking about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. They're watching something that's emotionally evocative on the stage, and then that happens. It takes you to that next level of adrenaline, that next height. Do you know what I mean? Which you can't. It's intangible, isn't it? It's the same as a haunting. It's an intangible thing that you can't put your finger on it. So why wouldn't somebody go and haunt these places
and relive that over and keep getting that adrenaline rush? I mean, I know from when I was younger and I used to do even when I've been in bands on stage, when I've done and I've done acting when I was at school and all that kind of thing. Like you say, the pure adrenaline rush you get because every piece has got to come together. Everything has got to work perfectly. And for that 60 minutes, 70 minutes, all eyes are on you. You are the world for people. You are the centre of their attention. Yeah. And if you're the kind of person that needs that. I'm not saying if I do or I don't, but I quite enjoyed it. You can become someone else. And as you're saying, Kerry, it normally means that those people in their personal lives aren't that happy with themselves. They need that. They need that validation. And B, they need that ability to become someone else that is a perfect person or it's the perfect character. And, you know, and the stagehands and the lighting technicians, and I mean, some of the ones I was reading up on, you get ghost cellists and ghost violinists and ghosts who are in the pit, the orchestra pit. It's that, whatever the role was that you were doing in the theatre that night when the production was on, the adrenaline and the need for you to get your things spot perfect would have been massive. So yeah, I agree with you, and that's what I'm trying to say, that I think it's that kind of magnetic pullback to what really, really energized you, what really did it for you, what floated your boat. Well, if I was going to choose to haunt somewhere, unless I was pissed off with someone and I wanted to make their lives hell, yeah, I'd probably go back to somewhere that I was happy and that I was enjoying it and that I was doing my thing day after day. Yeah, I get that. But the other case that I know that Sam's alluding to at Dog Street, this one's quite sad.
Okay.
This one is quite sad.
Yeah.
Isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, it's. So, just before we move on to obviously that one, just read a bit out in what they're discussing in the chat room, because the chat room is very busy tonight.
Good.
Ash says, if spirits exist, then they are not likely to be linked to one place. It's our comprehension of space and time that associates such things with a locality, in my opinion. A seance, for example, is said to pull spirits to the seance room, as mediums often state the spirit is near.
Yeah, but do you not think, Ash, I mean, it's all right, here's one for you, Ash. You might have a pub that you prefer to go to. You can go to any pub you like, but you still go back to that same pub over and over. Could a spirit not do the same thing? Not necessarily the pub, and I know there's a parallel between spirits and pubs, but I'm thinking more that if a spirit can move around, and it's our concept of space and time and all that malarkey, I don't sound quite as posh as you, because, I can't use those words. I don't understand them. But the point I'm making is that you've got, say, 20 pubs you could choose to go and have your beer at on a Friday night. You'll nearly always choose the same one because that's where you feel comfortable. That's where your friends are. That's where does the best beer. Could a spirit not have the same kind of thing, that there's lots of different places they could choose, but where would they prefer to be? Especially if they've got that conscience. They've got that, they can feel, they have emotions.
If we're saying then that spirits pretty much have got a choice of where they go, then basically it's a conscious choice of where they can go. And humans are creatures of habit. They like their favourite pub. They like to go to their particular theatre.
Which is what I'm trying to say in a very, very it is.
Which is where you're going with this thought. So why wouldn't they go to their favourite theatre or their favourite pub or their favourite museum or their favourite, I don't know, park or, whatever it be,
You've just put in a very eloquent, concise way what I was just rabbiting on about, what I was actually trying to say.
Sorry.
No, I don't apologise, love. Don't apologise. That was actually basically exactly what I was trying to say. But for once, I couldn't get the words out that I wanted to say.
But looking at but having said this, going back to the show perspective, what Sam is saying is a lot of them seem residual. Yeah, so it's like a replay of things that are going over time and time again, rather than intelligent choice hauntings. And that's a different ball game. That's almost like what we're talking about, a replay of a set incident in time and space that may not have, timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly thing that time can be, I love the Doctor Who link there. Anyway, talk to us about the sad case that you were saying.
You see, I don't think this one is residual. I think this one is interactive.
No, I don't think it's residual. But before that, I know I keep babbling on, but obviously Christopher Chell is in the chat room, and obviously I spoke a bit about Crew Lyceum at the beginning of the show, and Penny, you might find this interesting because obviously you're on about that you've looked into research of the stagehands and that still being there. There is a regular haunt at Crew Lyceum Theatre, which I mentioned earlier, and he is a resident stagehand who plays tricks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that seems to be quite a common one from some of the other theatre stories I was looking at. That it tends to be the staff as opposed to the cast. So the staff, the stagehands and the lighting techs and everything would have been based at those theatres. They wouldn't have, whereas a cast would have been, say, a touring cast a lot of the time. It does, yeah, that's quite a common one from what I've sort of, just general knowledge I've got of different hauntings of theatres. So is that Chris who's just put that then?
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
It's good, Chris is.
He's a love. We love the Chell. We love the Chell. Let's talk about Nettie. I want to talk about Nettie.
So, it's kind of a weird one and not a weird one. Like, obviously, Nettie is female, and you'd think, like, obviously we've been talking about how females would be in the theatre, but this is just kind of, like, not weird, but very peculiar because, basically, Nettie is believed to be seen gliding aimlessly. Don't know why I said that in that voice.
Very dramatic, very dramatic. She's auditioning.
Yeah, that's it now.
That's what it is.
Theatre bug, that's it now. But yeah, she is believed to glide. Actually, I'm like glide now. Throughout Dock Street Theatre, and she is believed to wear a tattered yet vibrantly coloured red dress. But it's just like weird. Like, I find it kind of weird, like interesting, this story, and sad because obviously she was 25. She was a country girl. She'd come to Charlestown because she wanted to obviously make a name for herself, but she obviously moved there or travelled there in the 1840s, but she wanted to also find love in her life and excitement. And it was, what I found weird is obviously, like, we know about prostitution and that, but it was like she was like 25 and a prostitute. Like, that's a bit like, okay, that is like weird.
You find that weird?
What is that? What
The 1840s. It's not.
No, I don't see that weird, but I just see like the age weird. Like, I know obviously about that they did use young girls in that era.
She wouldn't have been classed as young in that era, though, Sam. That's the thing to bear in mind. Young in that era, the average age that most of the single men. Now, there's a couple of reasons why she turned to prostitution, from what I found. But the other thing is to say they don't know for definite her name was Nettie. They think that might have been what locals called her because nobody knew her real name. She's meant to have come to Charleston from the country. Completely right, to find a husband because she couldn't find one where she lived, and she wanted the bright lights, big city type thing, which, you know, young girls and boys for that matter still do now. But at 25 she would have been classed as over the hill and a spinster. And which, you know, yes, in today's society we're like, what? But if I tell you that when I went to St. Louis in America, when I was working for an American firm and I was 29, and somebody asked me if I was married, and I said, no. And they went, oh, don't worry, you're not quite over the hill. And I'm thinking, I'm 29. You know, everything's still where it should be, thanks. But even there, so 25 would have been considered as way over the hill. Most of the men there who were single, even if they were older, would have been looking for brides in the sort of 16, 17, 18 mark. She would already be seen to be used goods and dried up at 25. Now, she's meant to have started working as a clerk for the church nearby and had a very good relationship. Not that kind of relationship, but the priest was very, very fond of her, treated her almost like a quasi-daughter. But to make a bit of extra cash, she saved up all her money from her clerk work, bought this red dress and started working as a prostitute at the Planters Hotel. But you have really got to get into what I think to make sense of this story is that 25 was classed as old. was classed as over the hill. If you weren't married by the time you were 25, you never were. That was it. You were a spinster. Now, from what I understand is the women of the town didn't treat her very well because everyone knew she was a prostitute. And even though these women's husbands were paying for her services, and apparently she was quite popular because she was good at what she did and she had the personality of an older woman, so she could engage in conversation, she was good at what she did. They were very derogatory towards her. And you know, their husbands who were visiting a prostitute during the week would still go to church every Sunday. And she started to tell these women what their husbands were like when they were rude to her at church, which is meant to have kind of put people off using her services. The fact that, you know, she didn't keep quiet about it. And from what I read, she basically started to her mental health started to go down. And do you know how they believe she was killed? Have you read that bit? Did you find that?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. That is.
So apparently she used to go out onto the balcony of the Planters Hotel and, you know, literally almost acting like a town crier, would be yelling abuse at the townspeople and telling them whatever their husbands were like, and the priest is meant to have tried to talk her down, like tried to get her to come back to the church, and she wouldn't take this red dress off. She basically lived and died in this red dress, literally. And as she was holding on to the metal railings, and Charleston, South Carolina, like a lot of the southern states of the US, get pretty amazing storms. The lightning is meant to have hit the railings that she was holding on to, and killed her. So I find her story quite tragic. Yeah. That, you know, she came there to try and make good, but because of A, her background, B, her age, and the fact she didn't come from like a named family and that kind of thing, nobody wanted anything to do with her.
And obviously, like, going back a little bit, it makes sense kind of in the way that she seemed to have a tattered dress, because obviously, like, I don't know, did you obviously they wouldn't have said how she looked, but it kind of a bit like, did she burn? Not to sound horrible, but did she burn? Or
she would have done. I couldn't find any sort of in-depth accounts of it other than the fact that she's meant to have been killed by an electrocution from the lightning hitting the metal railings. And if you look at pictures of the Planters, which I know we've talked about it, you've got those wrought iron railings out the front. So I think it's quite a tragic story that apparently she was a young woman, came there full of life, and if you like, being used and abused by the people of the town, in effect killed her.
Yeah.
So I don't blame her haunting the place, and apparently she still yells abuse at people. I don't blame her. No. I really don't. In fact, I think if I could go there and speak to her, I'd probably say to her, you were treated really badly. Yeah. You were treated really badly.
That's how they were though in them days, weren't they, with like if you were a prostitute and that.
They still are now though, Sam. People still are now. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just feel sorry for her that she was trying to better herself, and it didn't work. But I think it's sad. Yeah. So
I think it's sad as well, because she was still, she was
young.
She had the rest of her life to look forward to, and she'll never know what, if she actually did get what she wanted,
Yeah. No, it's her story I find quite sad. I do find it very, very sad.
Yeah.
Very sad. Very sad indeed. Is there anything else in the chat room? Because I can't see it.
Ash said, Penny, of course, a spirit could go somewhere specific, but that would rely on consciousness, and thus it would prove survival. But there isn't sufficient empirical evidence to support
empirical
that.
Evidence, yeah.
He's getting technical.
He's going into professor mode. Yeah. Come on, Ash, talk in basic English for us.
Hence, more likely is a residual type thing rather than conscious. all that theorised. Anything's possible, I guess, until we gain a true understanding.
Well, there's nothing wrong with questioning things and wondering why. But Nettie, I'm not surprised she's still there and she's still yelling abuse at people, which is what makes me think. And apparently, she does actually yell abuse at people. It's not the same thing over and over and over again. She stayed in the state that she was when she died, the kind of slightly mentally unhinged state. And that's what she was like when she's reported to have died. So, I do feel sorry for her. I do feel sorry for her, for what she went through.
Me too. And obviously it goes into the... Ash says, nope, why, what, when, how, where are my best friends, LOL.
Yeah, you're talking about open and closed questions there, Ash. You do remember I'm in sales, don't you? Oh dear.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Of course.
So with Nettie, does she? When does she haunt? Is it like, and who is she yelling at? Is she picking on specific people randomly, or does she sort of haunt at a specific time?
The stuff I found is it's any time. There was no commonality.
Maybe she's there casting judgment on people that treated her the way in life. So she was treated bad by these men and called them out when she was alive. Maybe she's doing that still in death, so passing judgment on people. So when she's doing this abusive haunting to people, maybe... Well, put it this way, if I was with a man and I had a ghost yelling abuse at him, I'd start digging.
But apparently it's men and women. It's men and women that she yells abuse at.
But she wasn't treated very well by the women. She wasn't received very well by women either, was she?
No,
so
she was everyone.
Basically saying, well, when your husband's out of town, he's with me. Do you know what I mean? You can imagine what she was going through on both fronts. She probably had no support.
She was getting it from all angles. The only person who seemed to have offered her any support was the priest. He was the only person who was kind to her.
Yeah.
Apparently what she used to say to the women wasn't so much like, guess what I'm up to with your husband, but she'd pay compliments about their husbands. She was clever. This is the thing about her that I find her quite astounding. I find not astounding in a sort of, oh, blimey, a clever woman who was a prostitute. Not like that, but... She wouldn't actually come out, supposedly, the reports I'd read on it, she wouldn't come out to the women and say, oh, guess what your husband's up to when your back's turned kind of thing. She'd be very complimentary about the husbands, about stuff that only the wives should know, shall we say. And so she was clever. She wasn't sort of just downright. That's what makes me think she had a mental break, because... She went from being this. She was very clever. She was meant to be very enigmatic, very good conversationalist, all that kind of thing, and she went to literally standing on a balcony yelling abuse. To me, it sounds like she had a mental break, and that's what caused it. Which, if she was being used and abused in effect by everyone, not just men, the women as well, because they wouldn't want anything to do with her, because she's the town prostitute. You'd cross the street to avoid them, wouldn't you? Well, I'm not saying you would, but you know what I'm saying. This very antebellum sort of society, this whole sort of...
But she was working out of a hotel, so she wasn't a street prostitute. So she would have had some level of social standing, having been that. But maybe she tripped herself up with her own cleverness.
Possibly. I just felt sorry for her. And I don't blame the fact she's still yelling abuse. But no, that was an interesting. I couldn't find any sort of links as the kind of people she is, men and women. So maybe she's some kind of judgment on them. Maybe she sees something they've done behind the scenes that that's why she's yelling abuse at them. But she's meant to be very angry, very sort of wild, very pissed off. Basically. Yes, I've said my bit now about Nettie. I feel sorry for her. Simple as.
Sam?
Do we have time to fit another one in, or what do you think?
Got a minute, love.
We're pushing it. We're pushing.
Probably not. Probably not.
I don't think we can. No. I did warn you how much I talk, Sam.
Yeah, I don't mind though. It's good, So anyway, guys, thank you, Penny, for stepping in. It is muchly appreciated because obviously Paul Call is still ill, so he's obviously took this week off. But he's told me today he should be back next week, so we hold him to that.
Yeah, I'm not around next week to do one, so he'll need to.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Hopefully, be on. But yeah, thank you everybody in the chat room: Ashley, Paul, Chris, Anita, Carrie, obviously, for everything she does.
Has Auntie Neat been in the chat room today as well?
Yeah, I've not met her yet. So.
Have you not met Auntie Neat?
No.
Hi, Neat.
But yeah. Thank you so much, guys. If anybody misses these shows, you can find us on Spreaker, which is obviously, if you're listening to the show, you'll know what it is. You can just click on the user Parasearch Radio, and you have all the previous shows listed there, which you can listen back to and download them. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, where obviously after the show it all goes up. And you can watch it that way. And as Kerry says, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And that is, I guess, a good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.